Ever wish you could just download like a lifetime's worth of knowledge directly into your brain? I mean, skip all the boring parts and just get to the good stuff.
Well, today might be the closest you get.
Welcome to the deep dive, where we extract all the juicy bits of knowledge and insightful nuggets from, well, a whole lot of sources, so you don't have to.
And today we're diving deep, really deep, into something pretty special. We're talking about the power of a single letter, a personal letter, and the wave of memories it brings back.
Yeah, get ready to see how a simple connection, from childhood can end up shining a light on some of the biggest challenges we face as adults.
Our main source today comes from a collection of excerpts we've been calling pasted text, and specifically, a really moving letter from a woman named Gowramma.
Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to uncover how those little everyday moments and the stories we hear early on can actually hold some seriously profound and practical wisdom that we can use right now.
Exactly. We're going to see how one person's life was completely shaped by a teacher's kindness and her absolutely captivating way of sharing stories.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little. Right off the bat, Gowramma's letter takes us to a very specific time and place in India a few decades ago. It paints a picture of a pretty harsh reality, especially in villages, where women who didn't have children faced a lot of social stigma.
Oh, absolutely.
They were often pushed to the sidelines, left out of important events, and even, subjected to some really cruel taunts.
Branded as barren women.
Exactly, and you can only imagine the emotional scars that leaves behind.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder of how much power cultural norms have and how they can really impact an individual's well-being, their sense of self-worth. I mean, you see echoes of this kind of thing even today, all over the world.
So true. And into this world walks Gowramma, as remembered by the narrator who knew her as a child. And the memories are so vivid, full of warmth and light. They talk about her kindness, her genuine warmth, her striking height, her beauty, and an ever-present cheerfulness.
It's interesting, right? She was their Sanskrit teacher, but it's obvious that she was so much more than just someone who taught grammar.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you have to wonder about the possible disconnect between her official role, as a Sanskrit teacher, probably focused on academic achievement, and her real gift, which was storytelling.
Right.
While other students might have been worried about their grades, the narrators really connected with Gowramma's old epics.
Absolutely. And the narrator specifically mentions the Kathasura Sagara as the source of these stories.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And for those who don't know, it literally means ocean of stories, which is so fitting. It's this ancient Indian collection of folk tales full of all sorts of characters and moral lessons.
Like a treasure chest of wisdom, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just the stories themselves, but Gowramma's incredible talent for bringing these ancient characters and narratives to life for her young students, like making them real.
You really get a sense of that power through the memories of her descriptions of Lord Krishna and Lord Rama.
Oh,
So vivid that years later, when the narrator saw a televised version of the Mahabharata, the actor playing Krishna, he fit perfectly with her childhood image.
wow.
But then, interestingly, when she saw the Ramayana on TV, the portrayal of Rama didn't match her internal picture at all,
Huh, that's so interesting.
which just highlights the profound impact Gowramma had on shaping her imagination. It really shows you the power of a well-told story to create these lasting mental images and emotional connections.
And can you imagine being in one of those storytelling sessions, the children completely engrossed, just slipping away until the school peon bursts in?
Yeah.
All flustered, reminding them they're the only ones left, apart from the school ghost, of course. It really paints a picture of how deeply immersed they were in those stories, the special bond they shared.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the narrator's deep appreciation for storytelling itself, and for Gowramma's unique way of connecting with her students. Even after the narrator moved to a different school, and those everyday memories of Gowramma started to fade, she would still run into her at the market sometimes.
Ah.
And those brief encounters would bring back all those feelings of warmth and affection. Shows you that even the smallest interactions can have a lasting positive impact.
It's really interesting to hear the family's take on Gowramma's situation, too. They recognized her goodness, her beauty, but they saw her childlessness and her husband leaving her as just bad luck. And to add another layer, her husband remarried, and although his new wife had kids, she was considered, less than Gowramma in terms of character. It's almost tragic, isn't it? I mean, from an outsider's perspective, at least. It makes you wonder if all that pity, even though she was so strong inside, maybe added to the burden she carried.
It's a really good question. It brings up that disconnect we often see between outward appearances or circumstances and a person's inner resilience. So her family might have seen her through the lens of societal expectations and, perceived misfortune, but Gowramma's inner world and the effect she had on others held a different kind of richness.
Yeah, absolutely. And fast forward a few years, the narrator's life has taken a pretty incredible turn. She's now the chairperson of Infosys Foundation, which is a huge leap from that little girl captivated by stories. Her life is full of travel, meeting new people, giving lectures at universities, and it's during one of these lectures that something truly transformative happens.
Right, she's at a university giving a lecture when a bright girl, as she describes her, asks this question that really makes her stop and think. It wasn't some simple question either. It dug into the heart of how we deal with difficulties.
And not how to avoid them, right?
Exactly. The girl was very specific about that, not avoiding them, but facing them head on. And the narrator admits that she was kind of thrown off by how deep the question was, but the girl's, youthful directness kept her engaged. It goes to show how a well-asked question can cut through all the superficial stuff and really get you thinking.
Oh, totally.
That persistence definitely struck a chord with the narrator. Maybe it reminded her of her own younger self, always asking questions. And in that moment of reflection, an unexpected answer pops into her head, a story from the Ramayana about Hanuman.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting. So, the narrator tells the story of Lakshmana, who's been badly wounded in battle, and the only thing that can save him is the Sanjeevani plant.
A very rare herb.
Right, found only on the Drona Mountains, which are like super far away. Hanuman, being the super devoted guy he is, sets off on this mission to find it. But when he gets there, he can't actually identify the specific plant.
And that's where things get interesting.
So, what does he do? Does he just give up?
No, not at all.
No. Instead of getting bogged down by the problem, he comes up with this radical solution.
He decides to uproot the entire mountain with all its plants and carry it back to Rama.
The whole mountain.
The whole thing. And remember, this is a massive mountain we're talking about. But crucially, Hanuman has this ability, to grow in size.
He gets, like, huge.
Huge. So he grows to this immense size, picks up the mountain, which now looks like a tiny pebble in his hand, flies back to Lanka, and boom, Lakshmana's life is saved.
Such a classic story, but as our bright girl pointed out, it's a pretty well-known tale. So what's the real insight here? What can we take away from this familiar story and apply to our own struggles?
And that's where the brilliance of the narrator's answer lies. You see, the girl, understandably, was a little impatient. Like, okay, that's a nice story, but how does that actually help me solve problems?
Right, right.
But the narrator then reveals the deeper message hidden within the story. She says, when you run into difficulties, you have to develop the ability to become bigger than the problem.
I love that.
She explains that we often have inner strength and resources that we haven't even tapped into yet. And if we see ourselves as bigger and more capable than the challenges we face, those obstacles start to seem smaller, more manageable.
Yeah.
But when we feel smaller than our problems, that's when they become truly overwhelming. And this, she says, became a guiding principle in her own life.
It makes you wonder, what do you think it was about that interpretation that resonated so strongly with those university students?
Well, the students loved it. They applauded. I think it was the universality of the message, and the power of the imagery. It's empowering to think that our internal state, how we see ourselves, plays such a huge role in how we deal with external challenges. And then, in a really touching moment, the narrator shifts the focus away from herself. She says, no, the real credit for this insight goes to my teacher, Gowramma. She acknowledges that it was Gowramma's ancient stories, her unique way of teaching, that instilled this lesson in her. It wasn't a lecture on problem solving, but the power of narrative, the metaphor that conveyed this deep understanding.
Such a beautiful tribute to the impact a good teacher can have. But the story doesn't end there. The narrator goes back to her busy life in Bangalore, and understandably, the details of that university talk start to fade into the background a bit.
Until one day, something seemingly ordinary happens. A letter arrives. But the secretary, when she brings it in, mentions how personal it seems. The handwriting is shaky, and the return address, Gowramma.
And this letter, wow, it's incredibly revealing. Gowramma reminds the narrator of the pain, the humiliation she went through when her husband left, how society judged her as a barren woman. She describes how people's perception of her changed. She went from being a respected Sanskrit teacher to just a story teacher. People, even with good intentions, suggested she should take on private tutoring to, scrape by.
It's heartbreaking. But even with all that, Gowramma's letter shows how much she believed in her work and the power of stories. And then there's this twist of fate. Her husband's second marriage, which was supposed to bring him the happiness of children, actually ends up bringing him shame and financial trouble because of his children's behavior. And get this, he actually turns to Gowramma for help, which she gives him, using her own savings.
No way. That's amazing.
It really shows her character, her inner strength.
It really does, but the real heart of the letter is why she finally decided to write. Her husband had shown her a newspaper article where the narrator publicly credited Gowramma's storytelling for her insightful answer at the university.
Gowramma describes her reaction to this as being frozen. It's so powerful. Despite the narrator not being her biological child, she felt this overwhelming sense of pride. Such a contrast to her husband's shame over his own kids. And then she says something so simple yet so profound. Now I don't have any complaint to God. Like all those years of suffering, the societal judgment, it all seems to melt away in that moment of recognition. It shows how a small act of acknowledging someone can make such a huge difference in their life.
You can just feel the weight being lifted off her shoulders, can't you? And the narrator, she cries when she reads the letter. It speaks volumes about their connection, the impact Gowramma had on her life.
It's amazing, isn't it? So when we put all these pieces together, what we see is that Gowramma's simple act of sharing stories, combined with her own quiet strength in the face of some serious challenges, profoundly shaped the narrator's ability to confront her own difficulties later in life. It wasn't a direct lesson, but a deep understanding absorbed over years of listening and witnessing resilience.
Right. It shows that wisdom isn't always taught directly. Sometimes it's absorbed through observation and being immersed in these powerful narratives.
Exactly.
And it emphasizes that profound lessons can be found in the most unexpected places through the most ordinary interactions. It wasn't a lecture, but the power of stories and Gowramma's silent example of strength that made all the difference.
And it highlights how powerful storytelling is, how it can transmit wisdom and shape our perspectives. Those hours spent lost in those ancient epics as a child weren't just entertainment. They were planting seeds of resilience, of creative problem solving, a fundamental understanding of human nature.
I love that. So this deep dive into Gowramma's letter shows us that the ability to grow bigger than the problem often comes from those seeds planted long ago, through the stories we hear, the people who mentor us, and by witnessing the quiet strength of others, even when we don't fully realize it at the time.
So what stands out to you the most from this story?
What really gets me is the beautiful, reciprocal impact. Gowramma's selfless teaching and quiet resilience had this profound effect on the narrator. And then years later, through a simple acknowledgement, the narrator gives Gowramma this feeling of peace and validation that had been missing for so long. It's a reminder that our actions, even the small ones, can have ripple effects that we may never fully see.
That's a really beautiful point. It speaks to how interconnected we all are and how important it is to recognize the contributions of others.
So for you listening right now, I want you to think about the Gowrammas in your own life. Those people whose small acts of kindness or quiet examples might hold the key to navigating the challenges you face today and the ones you'll face tomorrow. Have you really acknowledged their impact? Maybe now's a good time to reflect on your own influences, those unexpected sources of strength in your life.
This deep dive reminds us that wisdom isn't always loud and obvious. Sometimes it whispers to us from the corners of our memories, waiting to be rediscovered and appreciated.
And that's the deep dive for today. Join us next time as we explore another fascinating collection of sources and uncover more hidden insights, all curated just for you.
Until then,
See you next time.
bye.